Welcome back to the shop, everybody. Today we are actually going to be putting in the doors in the trailer. Oh wait, they've already been done. Let's go ahead and go back in time and see what that took to do. Let's start by taking a look at the doors. There are two doors, one for the right and left sides of the trailer. Each door has a split window in it, as well as a handle with two locks, one on the handle and one deadbolt. The outside of the door has a trim that is pre-drilled for screws. There's also a rain gutter that goes on the top portion of the door. On the inside of the door they have two keys connected to the door itself. I do believe that the other door also came with a pair of two. The red latch here is the deadbolt, and then you have just your regular door latch. There's a piece of trim for the inside of the trailer to cover any gaps between the door and the hole that you have cut out. The window has a little plastic latch so that when you open it, it will stop at that point and hold the window in place. The screen itself can also be moved up and down in the track and is stopped and held in place once again by that little plastic latch. The first step to installing the door was I needed to cut off any of the excess plastic that is on the Phylon to protect it from scratches and stuff, because I didn't want this to end up going underneath the door as I was installing it. The next step was I needed to hold the Phylon in place on the top of the trailer somehow, so I went ahead and clamped that in place. Once this was done, I was able to do a test fit, as well as measure and make sure that the door on both sides was the same distance from the bottom of the trailer. Then I went ahead and removed the door. Once I looked at the door for a little bit, I realized that it indeed had a few screw holes missing from the factory, so I went ahead and drilled those, as well as added in a couple of corner holes because I wanted to add in a couple extra screws around those areas. I then once again put the door back in place and pre-drilled into the trailer itself. Once I had put some butyl tape on the inside of the door frame, I was then able to insert it into the hole and get it screwed in place. Alright, now that you guys are all caught up, we're going to be putting the trim onto the top of the trailer here. And the first thing I got to do is I need to go around and tape all of this as tight as I can up against the wall of the trailer. And I'm just going to use some blue painter's tape for that. Alright, so here we go. We are all taped up here on both sides mostly. This side here is giving me a little bit of trouble, so I'm going to do this back portion last, because where I have all this plastic here, as you can see, there's a lot of slack there, so I need to put a lot of pressure up against that to be able to get that to go back where it's supposed to. And I also realize that there's a little bit of a gap up here that I'm going to have to figure out how to fill as well. I also went ahead and removed this plastic here from underneath this piece, just that way then it's not there when I go to screw all of this on. Now eventually this may end up cracking or breaking, and to fix that I will just have to undo the side up to about this point here and just simply replace it in the future if that ever even needs replacing. So my game plan for this is to work my way down from the corner slowly all the way up to the top there. Then I'll go ahead and do the other side, all while I am trying to push any slack out of the top Phylon. Now as I'm working my way up, I'll be removing the painter's tape as well as the backing to the sticky portion here. All right, so up till this point, you've seen that I've got the trim on this side of the trailer as well as the door. Well, unfortunately, when I was putting that bottom trim onto this side, I noticed that the door's in wrong. And what gave it away is nothing on the door itself except for that little weep hole. That little slit right there is to let any water that gets into the window out. And supposedly the door has one as well. Now this side was already going to have to come out because unfortunately where I have the latch at, the latch isn't quite where it should be because it wasn't able to get past the wood and the phylon. So as you can see right here, you can kind of see that it is this way more than it should be. So I was already going to have to take this door out. However, I was hoping that it was going to be just this door. But as it turns out, I'm going to have to take the other side off too. Now I was considering putting the bottom trim on this other side of the trailer like I did the other one before I end up doing that door swap. However, as you can see here, there's a fairly large bubble in between the phylon and the wood of the trailer. And it's not wanting to come out. I put a piece of plywood up against this and shimmed it up against the wall to the trailer, and for some reason it just does not want to come out. And as you see, I got clamps back here that was supposed to hold it out, and it's just not working. So I'm kind of thinking that if I take the door off, there shouldn't really be anything holding the phylon in place except for whatever clamps I have. So hopefully I can figure out what clamps I would need to remove to be able to get this large bubble out. Now this area that is really bad is that same area that I'm gonna have a lot of trouble getting the protective plastic off of. So I don't know if the protective plastic shrank too much and it's just making it curve like that, or if because it was in the sun, the phylon just wants to, you know, kind of mold to that round shape that it was when it was in storage. Either way, I gotta try to do something with it, and I think it's gonna start with getting the doors removed. All right, so I got both the doors off. This is the passenger side door, and unfortunately, this all got out of its little groove, so I'm gonna have to work on getting that back into place. All right, so I'm pretty sure this is now in place where it needs to be. I may need to hammer in the edging a little bit more, but other than that, it is fairly good. All right, so I went ahead and got this passenger door put in properly. Notice no leak hole and leak hole there. I also found out that the door was actually put in the majority of the way. Last time it wasn't as big a deal as I thought. So hopefully once I get the little rain gutter and the RV sealant put on here, this door will be nice and waterproof. And now the driver's side I haven't put in yet because I really needed to get that pylon up against the trailer as tight as I possibly could. And well, as you guys can see here, it took a little bit of ingenuity to do so. Luckily, I had the side of the building to put the wood up against, and it's just kind of pressure fitted in there up against the plywood. The closest piece of plywood here is where that big kind of bubble is that I can't get to lay flat. I made sure that I have some all over the place. You know, I got some in the center, I got some on the far side, the middle here, as well as very low on the pylon. So I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm hoping that when I put the door in, that will lock it in place a little bit better. Hopefully these screw holes don't line up perfectly so that it'll actually do so, because if it does, it's just going to go right back to how it was, and I'm gonna have issues. Now, before I put the doors back up, what I am doing is any place that I think I can kind of roll over the butyl tape, I am doing that just so that then I make sure that that gets pushed down nicely, as well as any spots like this where it is missing. I'm going to be filling those in with little pieces as well, all the way around the trailer. And look at here, here is a big old bubble right here. So I'm wondering if that's not a part of this issue here. But that will get taken care of once I put the door on and get it screwed. Chances are it's either going to work its way out the bottom or maybe over here where, as you can see, there is a bit of movement. All right, now that this door is back on and the proper direction, once again, no weep hole. So that's good. So two things. That bubble that I showed you by the door did indeed move forward. As you can see, it is like right in this area here. Now I'm not sure exactly how to fix that. However, we also have a bubble up here, as you can see, and it's a fairly large one. I mean, that's kind of a pain. So what I'm thinking about doing is I think I'm going to try to get rid of that bubble before I do anything with that whole situation. Now, I could just leave it because honestly, nobody's gonna ever see it, as the toolbox comes up to like right about here, and then it is pretty good all the way back. And I was just gonna call it good. However, I think while I'm fixing stuff, I might as well go ahead and do this before I put in more screws all the way down. So what I'm hoping that I can do is just remove part of this one here, like up to here. Just loosen it up, you know, get it away from the pylon, push that down, and hopefully I can get this all to lay nice and flat in there without having to do any additional trimming. And then I can just screw it right back down. All right, so as I was removing the plastic from the bottom of the trailer here, I noticed that this bubble that appeared here after I put the door on was actually quite a bit worse than I thought that it was. And then I started looking at what I had fixed up here for this front panel here and realized that evidently the protective piece is like a 1/16 longer than the front of the trailer is. So I actually will have to trim that off so that everything can sit properly. Otherwise, the trim here can't go in far enough to properly hold the wall pylon here. And as you can see, when I press down on that, that comes right to where it should. So that should lay really nice and flat, but when it doesn't have the pressure from this or the butyl tape holding it, it just ends up wanting to bubble instead. So that's where I'm at on this thing, and it's just frustrating because I've already removed that piece like twice already, but it is what it is. I want it to look good, so that's going to be the only way to do that. All right, so unfortunately, this is still here. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still enough that it's gonna annoy me. So I'm gonna have to figure out what exactly is going on there, because really it should be all nice and tight, and it has the room to go tight. It's just not doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm gonna have to try to figure out what exactly is going on there. So now the last thing to do today is to take these down and see what is actually going on now with that Phylon that was bubbled there. Now I have it clamped at the back, and I was talking to my dad and he agrees that maybe I ought to put 2 or 3 screws just on the edge of the Phylon there, so that hopefully that will help keep this straight until it comes time to putting the angle aluminum on the corner there, which will have screws on the back side as well as the side. So once those screws are in, we can take a look and see what's going on with the Phylon after I take this down together. Now back here, there's a little bit of movement, but I would actually be happy with it if that's how it was. It's not bad at all. So let's start with the top. All right, and it looks like it is not half as bad as it was earlier. So I'm happy with that. There's a little bit of movement in here, but some of that will get taken away when I go to put the little attachment for the side table on. That will actually be on both sides of the camper, so it'll depend on what side I want the table on, will be able to be there. Now of course I still have the screws as well as the clamps back here, and I'm gonna leave those until it comes time to doing the back galley.